Today, we're looking at one of Jesus's more challenging teachings, his words on divorce from the Sermon on the Mount. Found in Matthew 5:31-32, Jesus' teaching on divorce might seem strict at first glance, but he's addressing something deeper, our commitment, our relationships, and God's design for marriage. Let's dive into these verses to understand what Jesus is saying about marriage and divorce, and explore how this teaching connects with other parts of the New Testament. Jesus says, "It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Matthew 5:31-32. In the context of Jesus' time, divorce had become relatively common, and it was often unfairly used against women. By referring to the certificate of divorce, Jesus is addressing a law meant to protect the rights of the one being divorced, but he is pushing for something deeper, a commitment to the sanctity and purpose of marriage itself. Mark 10:9. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. In Mark 10:9, Jesus reinforces this idea saying, "What God has joined together, let no one separate." He's affirming that marriage is a sacred union, intended by God to be a lifelong commitment. In this teaching, Jesus is reminding his listeners and us that marriage is a covenant, not just a contract. It's meant to reflect God's commitment to us. Divorce was permitted under certain conditions in the Old Testament, mainly as a concession to human weakness, but Jesus calls us to see the true purpose of marriage, a faithful, loving relationship. Ephesians 5:31-32. For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. In Ephesians, Paul calls marriage a mystery, something that reflects Christ's relationship with the church. This union is about more than companionship. It's a covenant relationship that mirrors God's love for us. When Jesus mentions except for sexual immorality, he's acknowledging that infidelity can break the marital bond. While this doesn't mean divorce is required, it's allowed in cases of unfaithfulness. Jesus' primary goal here isn't to restrict people, but to encourage us to honor marriage with the commitment it deserves. 1 Corinthians 7:10-11. A wife must not separate from her husband, and a husband must not divorce his wife. In 1 Corinthians 7, Paul also advises against divorce, encouraging reconciliation and patience whenever possible. However, he understands that there are complex situations where separation might occur. Even so, the ideal remains to honor the commitment of marriage. So, what can we take from Jesus' teaching on divorce? He's calling us to see marriage as sacred, a relationship that isn't disposable. He's asking us to approach marriage with a heart of commitment and faithfulness, mirroring God's unbreakable love for us. For those who have experienced divorce, remember that God's grace is vast and his compassion is unending. This teaching is not about condemnation, but about calling us to the highest standard of love. Marriage is covenant, God's design for lasting love. Thank you for joining me today as we looked at this important teaching. If you have any thoughts or experiences you'd like to share, please feel free to comment below.